Incoming message.
All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. I want you to put yourself directly into the shoes of a lead field archaeologist for a second. Imagine you're standing on a dusty site, surrounded by the history of literally one of the most documented cities on planet Earth. And then suddenly, the ground opens up and reveals something that absolutely defies explanation. We're going to treat this like a suspenseful investigative story about lost human secrets today, and our main tool is going to be the raw evidence left behind in the stone.
So picture the sheer shock of this moment in May 2026. A construction team is out there doing routine pre-construction excavations near Kibbutz Ramat Rachel, which is right on the southern outskirts of Jerusalem. Now, Israeli law actually mandates these surveys before you disturb the ground, just because the history there is so layered. But then workers knocked through a solid rock wall, and the entire tense atmosphere of the site just shattered, the project ground to an absolute halt. They had breached a completely hidden, massive subterranean void.
And honestly, it's such a brilliant illustration of a sensory collision. Up on the surface, you've got the noisy, heavy machinery of the modern world, right? Engines roaring, dust flying everywhere, crews shouting. But the exact second they tore that hole straight into the bedrock, they were met with this cavern of eerie, untouched silence. A space that probably hasn't heard a human voice in thousands of years. Safe to say the construction manager was probably not thrilled about the delay, but it's that precise moment of breakthrough that turns a totally standard construction site into an active archaeological crime scene.
Now, to really understand the scale of what we're investigating here, we are not talking about some tiny claustrophobic crawl space or a narrow drainage pipe. This tunnel is a massive 5 meters that is nearly 16 feet high. This scale immediately flips our entire investigation on its head. This isn't just a standard secret escape route for a handful of royals to sneak out of a palace. It's a passage large enough to secretly move substantial numbers of people or even massive objects entirely underground.
Let's look at the raw evidence, straight from the crime scene. It reveals an absolute engineering impossibility. The team has uncovered 50 meters of this passage so far, and carving 50 perfectly straight meters through notoriously hard Jerusalem limestone that requires way more than just your standard iron pickaxes. It requires heavy, specialized structural tools, a massive labor force, and extreme precision. This thing wasn't just haphazardly hacked out. It was executed with incredibly uniform walls and a consistent ceiling. So moving into the investigation and evaluating the theories. Like any good investigator, when we find a mysterious void in the ground, we have to look at the usual suspects first.
And what's really fascinating here is how quickly the physical evidence helps us eliminate the standard historical explanations. We test quarrying? Doesn't fit. We test water management? It completely lacks the physical proof. The only theory that actually aligns with a massive, highly precise void is a secret passage. Let's break down exactly why those first two theories fail so spectacularly.
So, theory one is usually quarrying. Jerusalem limestone was highly valued, extensively extracted throughout antiquity. You'd logically think, oh, workers were just following a really useful seam of stone deeper into the bedrock. But the tool marks and the layout, they tell a totally different story. If this were just a quarry, ancient laborers would have hacked irregularly along the natural fissures of the stone. Quarries are messy. This tunnel, on the other hand, maintains a uniform height and width over its entire 50-meter length. It is simply too perfectly engineered to just be a byproduct of pulling out stone.
Okay, theory two, water management. Now, Jerusalem's ancient engineers were absolute wizards at this. Just look at the famous 8th century BC Hezekiah's Tunnel, which was carved to bring water from the Gihon Spring to the Pool of Siloam. But here's the thing, water tunnels leave undeniable physical evidence. They leave water flow marks, mineral deposits, layered sediment, you name it. Initial reports from this new tunnel show it is totally clean, completely bone dry. It completely lacks those features, totally ruling out an ancient plumbing system.
Which brings us to the engineering impossibility. We've eliminated the mundane stuff, which forces us to ask the big question. Who could have actually built this massive secret corridor? And how on earth did they keep it quiet?
The Israel Antiquities Authority actually released a statement noting this required significant resources. And they're right. A highly organized power structure had to carve 16-foot-high walls through extreme rock hardness. That takes a massive, highly organized workforce. Plus, they had to dispose of literal tons of limestone debris completely undetected. To execute advanced masonry while maintaining absolute silence about the project, that implies a staggering social hierarchy at play. This was definitely not some small private weekend endeavor.
And that leads us to an incredibly baffling aspect of this whole case. Jerusalem is arguably the most intensively excavated city on planet Earth.
The Antiquities Authority has conducted systematic surveys there for decades using highly advanced ground-penetrating radar. So how does modern technology completely fail to identify this enormous 5-meter-high void until a construction crew literally falls into it? It was either hidden incredibly well by its builders, or it was sealed off and lost to memory with absolute terrifying perfection.
Just look at the timeline here. Jerusalem sits on approximately 7,000 years of continuous human occupation. Generation after generation built entirely new civilizations right on top of this tunnel. The modern city sits on the Byzantine, which sits on the Roman, the Herodian, the Hasmonean, all the way down to the city of King David. Every single layer sealed what came before it. This tunnel is so old and was concealed so flawlessly that entirely new empires lived their whole lives completely oblivious to the massive secret hiding right beneath their feet.
Now let's talk about the strategic corridor from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. To understand the why of this mystery, we really have to look closely at the where, because in archaeology, real estate is everything. This passage sits directly beneath one of the most historically loaded religious routes on the entire planet, just outside the ancient city walls, pointing straight toward Bethlehem. I mean, this corridor has been deeply significant for 3 major world religions for 3 millennia. A tunnel on this exact route suggests immense strategic, economic, and religious value. It could have been used as a central infrastructure for hidden trade routes, to secretly move armies, or maybe as a clandestine storage space to rush priceless sacred temple relics away from public eyes during times of siege. Whatever it was built for movements requiring extreme, unapologetic privacy.
But the thing is, this fits into a much larger, global underground pattern. To really grasp the magnitude of this, we have to zoom out. This isn't just an isolated anomaly in Israel.
You know, we've discussed Derinkuyu in Turkey before, that massive 18-level underground city built to house and hide 20,000 people, which was sealed from the inside for totally unknown reasons. Just like Derinkuyu, this Jerusalem tunnel represents an ancient civilization going to extreme, heavily engineered lengths to conceal themselves and their activities deep underground, completely isolated from the above-ground world.
And it powerfully echoes the famous Dead Sea Copper Scroll. Remember that? It was a literal metal treasure map designed to survive for millennia, documenting 64 clandestine underground locations where sacred temple relics were hidden away. When we look at this newly discovered passage near Bethlehem, we absolutely have to wonder if we are looking at the exact kind of clandestine religious storage site the Copper Scroll was talking about.
And honestly, whether we're looking beneath pre-Columbian sites, ancient Amazonian cities, medieval European settlements, or now Jerusalem, we see this exact same pattern. These networks are consistently older than the structures above them. They display a level of engineering sophistication that frankly shouldn't exist for their time. Everywhere human civilization is built, there are highly sophisticated underground networks hidden so perfectly that the people living above them never even knew they were there.
I want to circle back to this crucial quote for a second because it really reveals the sheer power dynamics of ancient Jerusalem societies. The fact that someone with immense authority, massive wealth, and advanced engineering knowledge poured this much labor into a project solely to keep it a secret beneath the most contested religious real estate on Earth, it's staggering. They essentially weaponized engineering to erase themselves from history.
And as this active excavation continues through the eerie silence of that bedrock, dealing with the really intense technical challenges of mapping a space hidden for 2 millennia, it leaves us with one haunting question. We've only seen 50 meters so far. When they finally reach the end of this incredibly precise, massive passage, what lost piece of human history is going to be waiting for us in the dark? Subscribe, because when they find the other end, it could literally rewrite history. Let me know in the comments, what do you think they were hiding down there? I'll see you in the next explainer.
Come to me, chickens! Cock-a-doodle-doo!